Why are baggers better, and why do we always say all roads lead to baggers? Now, a lot of people that have a problem with this, I think they're taking it as an indictment if they don't have a bagger. And that's not really what um, I take the phrase to be. So, really, what it is there are some measurable differences between the touring chassis bikes, the touring bikes, and the mid-size bikes. And it's really looking at your use case and saying, okay, what am I using my bike for? And if you're spending your hard-earned money on a bike, you want it to do the things that you want it to be able to do. And you want it to do those things well, especially if you're spending really good money on it like a Harley Davidson would. So what does make the touring bikes better? Why are the baggers better? Number one is going to be comfort. Um, it really makes a big difference when you're doing a lot of miles and you're having long days on the bike. And one thing I always tell people is not all miles are equal. So be splitting lanes and it can feel like a lifetime to go 50 miles. But when you're on the open road and you're able to do 85, 90, 95 miles an hour just to get from point A to point B, there's not a lot to see in between, like out where we are. If we're going out the 40, you've ridden the 40 a million times and you've already seen it. There's nothing to see. I'm just trying to get to where I'm going to. And that comfort during those miles, it can really make a big difference. So if your use case does not include touring, then maybe the bagger isn't better. And I think a lot of people have to be honest about what they're using their bike for. So in my opinion, there's a whole range of things that all the bikes can do. If we're talking about Harley models and we're talking about a softail chassis versus the touring chassis, all of these bikes can do most of the same stuff very, very, very well. And then you have a small margin over here where one bike may excel in certain areas. And then you have another margin over here where another bike may excel. So one of the biggest comparisons is going to be the Lowrider ST versus the Road Glide. So, okay, we're taking the price difference between the two and what am I getting for my money? And are those features actually valuable to me? Is it worth it for me to spend that extra money? So we can speak in generalities and say, well, yeah, baggers are better on paper, so that doesn't mean they're better for everyone. And I think that's an important thing to consider when you're trying to compare two different models, is that use case means everything. If I don't do any touring, then the things that are better about the bagger don't apply to me. So that bike is not better to me. And also your physicality, your body stature can all make a difference. So that doesn't mean a smaller guy should be on a smaller bike and a bigger guy should be on a bigger bike. You should be on a bike that you feel comfortable on. There are plenty of people who are taller than me that prefer a softail chassis. And there are people who are shorter than me that have been on baggers way longer than I've been on baggers. So I don't think it's necessarily a generality of I'm going to take, if you fall into this category, you should get XYZ bike. I don't think it's really about that. The measurable difference on the bagger is the touring chassis. Chassis, it's hard to argue that the chassis isn't more comfortable, especially when you're logging long miles. So in that respect, the bagger, I think, is better if you're doing distant stuff. And it should be. It's a little bit more expensive and it's a touring bike. It's what's considered a touring bike. The Lowrider ST is kind of that bike that crosses over and dips its toes into both areas. So really, for my use case, if I'm pulling my bike out, I don't really want to commute on my bike. If I'm pulling my bike out, I want to meet up with my buddies and I want to actually go somewhere and I want to see some shit. That's kind of what I want to do on my bike. So my mid-size bike, I don't really expect it for that. My mid-size bike is more of a sentimental collector's piece. And, I love that bike and I'll never get rid of it. And I enjoy riding it from time to time, but I don't expect it to do the things that my Road Glide can do. When it comes to being at the shop and somebody says, well, which bike is better for me? That's when you kind of get into the questions of, okay, well, what do you want the bike to do for you? And if you're like me and touring is the main focus, then you're probably more likely going to see the value in a touring bike. If you're talking about a simple commute that's, 15 to 50 miles a day, and you're ripping the canyons on the weekends with your friends, the bagger doesn't necessarily give you a whole lot extra value in those two scenarios. So I think the reason this adage has hung around for so long, and the reason we keep talking about it is The longer you ride, the more you ride, the more longer trips you end up doing, the more you start to see value in the little things. So when I first started riding motorcycles on the streets, I saw no value in having gauges. I didn't have gauges on my bike. I like to take my gauges off. I thought cruise control was absolutely stupid. And now I'm a little bit older and I've got injuries. I've ripped this arm in half and I got shoulder issues and nerve issues and I get throttle fatigue. It doesn't take me long for my arm to start hurting. So I use cruise control every single time I ride the bike. So now I'm in a different position. And I like to encourage people to be open to your own evolution. Like who you are now shouldn't be who you are 5 years from now, especially when we're talking from a motorcycle standpoint. Technology is going to improve. Bikes are going to get better and you are going to change as a person. You are going to find value in things later down the line that you don't find value in now. And it's okay. It's okay to evolve as a person. Many might argue, and I would too, that it's a good thing to evolve and to have your tastes change because you are changing as an individual. Sometimes I think this comparison is rooted in, well, this person owns this bike, so they're going to argue for this bike, and this person owns the other bike, so they're going to argue for this bike, and we're never going to see eye to eye. And I think that's a failure of a premise. I think what the premise should be is you should like what you like. People will try to defend what they own. And if you have a lowrider ST, you love your lowrider ST, which you should. I'm happy for you. You're going to argue that this bike does everything that it should do. And the same could be said for the touring bike. If you like touring bikes, ride touring bikes, pay for touring bikes, you're going to argue that these are better in some sort of measurable way. But what it really comes down to is there's plenty of guys who are riding cross-country trips on hardtail shovels or older, and or Evo Sporties, 5 speeds, 4 speeds that are doing cross-country. And it can be done if you have enough willpower, and hopefully you have the youth and the health to be able to ride like that. It can absolutely be done. What I always encourage people to do is try to be open-minded and understand that there are things you don't know that you don't know. And sometimes you will grow into these opinions and grow into these preferences over time. And I think sometimes that's very looked over. So we could talk about luggage. Absolutely, on a lowrider ST, it comes with 2 bags and you can strap a big bag onto the back. And you can carry just as much stuff as a bagger could with a tour pack on. Once you start riding and you start getting caught in inclement weather, which will happen when you're touring, you realize that, okay, well, all my stuff is stuffed in a duffel bag, and the thing that I need right now in the rain is at the very bottom, and I have to dig it out. Whereas the touring bags with the tour pack, it's much easier to find stuff. So little fine-tuning details like that, just as an example, can start to make a difference as your riding journey progresses. Another thing I encourage people to do is to go rent a bike. Go to RiderShare, Twisted Road, Eagle Rider, whatever bike rental service you can find that's in your area, and go rent a bike. So if you ride a Softail, go rent a bagger and take it out for the weekend. That's what we do at work, is we leave Saturday night at the end of our work week, and we ride Sunday and Monday, and we're back to work on Tuesday. There's plenty of time to go see all kinds of beautiful things and really put a bike to the test and see if it's going to fit you. And you just might find that your opinions are based in speculation or based on things that you've heard other people say that make sense to you and you would agree with. I encourage you to put those things to the test. Ride the bikes, spend as much time on different bikes as possible, and you will start to appreciate the little differences between them. Some of these differences, depending on the person's perspective, can be big differences or small differences. And I think that's a very individual thing that is up to you to decide. And if you don't spend time on these bikes, if you're not actually putting miles down, sitting on a saddle for 8 to 10 hours a day, it's really hard to get that perspective of, can I predict how I'm going to like this bike after riding it for 10 hours if you've never ridden it for 10 hours? So at that point, everything is kind of conjecture until you've actually done it. So if you look at the guys who have been doing this a long time, logged a lot of miles, have ridden a lot of different bikes, they've all kind of ended up in the same area, which is baggers. And all those little differences, they all start to stack up over the years and have a long riding career. At some point, you start to value those little things, and they all add up to make a big difference for your enjoyment while you're out on the road. Now, that doesn't speak for everyone. There's always going to be the outliers. There's always going to be the guys that prefer a different bike. So when you're looking at information like this, you're basically just trying to data collect and get experiences from different types of people. And when they all kind of lead in the same direction, that's how an adage sticks around. And that's why baggers are better.
All right, so we're just packing up. Mickey's buckling everything down, got the tent all packed up, all the food and gear all packed up. I think this is Mickey's very first like long, proper ride on the Pan America.
Yeah, man, I've been lucky enough to test ride a few. I think I rode yours for lunch. I borrowed Andrew's one time when I was getting worked on my other bike. And you know, I kind of fell in love with the bike. I've been talking about buying this for a long time. But now after this, like, this is where it's at. Like, being able to ride a bike for a couple days and putting some serious miles on it really makes a difference. Because I even tell this to our customers when they're trying to decide between bikes. It's like, hey, go rent a bike and ride it where you want to ride it. Go take it through your local canyons. You know, I'm glad I took my own advice, and Eagle Rider is definitely the way to go. You know, we went in there, it was super easy. Just picked up the bike and it had the panniers on it, so all I had to do was just strap a top bag on it and throw my tent on, and I was good to go.